Welcome tonight to First Thursdays at the Marin County Law Library. For those that who haven't been here before, I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce a couple of the folks that are with us tonight who are our mainstays at the Law Library. The first would be our law librarian, Lori. Lori is the person that holds all of this together, especially critical in our day-to-day operations. She not only manages a staff and keeps the law library running, but she also makes it possible for us to do events like this and also our Lawyers in the Library program. I'd also like to introduce this year's president of the board, which is Christine Kirby, who is actually the physical host tonight and is providing her resources so we can do this online. To let you know a little bit about this and why we're doing it and how it has changed a little bit since COVID-19, we started this program last November, and it was based upon our experiences that both Lori reports to us and Lawyers in the Library brings back to us. And that is that many of the folks that come to us for our services, and we are obviously a little bit different from a regular library, we're a law library, come to us with a variety of needs. Some of them can be solved in a 20-minute consultation. Some of them will need referrals. Some of them will need advice from resources we don't provide directly. That's how we came to the idea and the significance of inviting other members of our community. And tonight it's Canal Alliance, and we're delighted. So people will understand that there are resources outside the law library that we can get them to in hopefully a timely and efficient way. What does that mean? It means that we all need to know about each other. Quite honestly, when we started this program back in November, we were able to invite you in, literally come sit with us once a month, sit across from people, have an informal discussion about these services, and we actually started with the Public Defender's Office way back in November. What have we found since then, and especially with the advent of COVID, when we can no longer sit across from each other? These needs for resources are particularly acute. We find, for instance, if somebody comes to us, let's use an example of an unlawful detainer, they would get a referral to an agency that can help them. But what do we find often with an issue of unpaid rent? There may be other aspects of the tenancy that the tenant needs assistance with. Should we know about other resources, be it fair housing, be it Marin Legal Aid? Any of these places, including a Canal Alliance, may be part of putting the puzzle together to meeting a client's needs. Since we can no longer have you come and sit with us, and who knows, this may turn out to be, a blessing in disguise. Maybe we will ultimately end up with more people, becoming familiar with an event like this because we're now recording it. And through the assistance of Christine and Lori, we are planning a library of these interviews and these discussions that we have with different organizations. What does that mean? Somebody looking at our website, and I'm going to invite you to do that before the day is over if you get a chance, take a look at the number of resources that Lori and her staff have made available on the website. Is it complete? No. That's why we reach out to organizations like Canal Alliance. When we're finished tonight, I hope we're all better informed about what Canal Alliance does, even if we individually have no occasion to ask for help through one of their resources. The likelihood is we're going to meet someone that does need it. That's the point of this. That's the point of recording it. This is a work in progress. I will tease you, Lucia. We'll invite you back a year from now to talk about all the changes that you've gone through and what's happening in the community. But today is our start with your organization and learning more about the resources and how we can get members of the community there. So I'm very, very pleased tonight to turn this over to you and to thank you for taking time out of what I think is a very busy schedule to come and help us learn more about making a good referral to Canal Alliance. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Let me just unmute myself. And also, I usually like to have the chat box open, and I'm trying to do that just in case people have questions. But yeah, here it is. So that you know that if I have the chat box office and you want to open and you want to say something to me in private, that might not be necessarily the best way to do it. So it has happened before. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's nice to see some familiar faces. I have always been a big fan of the library. It's it's a small but mighty team. So I am actually it's very nice to be able to connect with you that because of COVID, some of the ongoing meetings and opportunity to connect have been interrupted. So I'm glad that I spent some time with you today. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what Canal Alliance does, right? And I was invited today because you have this round of talks and about different agencies, but obviously when it comes to Canal Alliance, the population that we serve and organization has been incredibly impacted by COVID. So the context of the presentation obviously is going to include some of that information. Just get started. Why it's not going on? Oh, hold on. Okay. So this is a little agenda so that you see some of the things I'm going to be talking about. So I am going to be speaking a little bit about Canal Alliance. I know that you probably heard about us many times, but I think it's a good time to refresh about what our services we provide and where we're up to these days. I'm also going to give you a little bit of a overview of the population that we serve. It's Latinos living in Marin County. I'm going to talk a little bit about the COVID-19, well, actually quite a bit about COVID-19 impact and ways that you can actually support low-income immigrant Latinos in Marin. And since you were talking about how you see people coming to the law library and that oftentimes encounter many issues, and not only legal issues, but other issues as well, right? And now that we also have a social worker, and we know and understand that people living in poverty obviously needs oftentimes many services. And then I have a list of community resources that we don't have to go over them, in detail, but I can absolutely share with you if that's something you want to have as part of your work, so that you know where you can find a lot of information and resources. So what's Canal Alliance? So Canal Alliance, and actually our mission, exists to break the generational cycle of poverty of Latino immigrants and their families by lifting barriers to success. So quite frankly, a lot of people don't see us, they see us either as an immigration service provider, or they see us as somebody doing social services or education. So it depends on the optic that you have, or the staff that you have interacted with. You may have a different idea about our agency, but the truth is that the core of our mission, what we really want to do is help people that are living in Marin County, oftentimes Latinos or either immigrants or the children of immigrants escape poverty. And I will talk a little bit about how the statistics are very concerning around the state of affairs for Latinos in Marin County. But that is really why we're there. That's really why we exist. And we have a theory of change that actually we believe in our theory of change. We believe that if we do combine the legal status and education, what we're probably going to result is having an individual or in a family achieve some sort of socioeconomic stability. And this is not something that we just came out of nowhere. This is something that we have tons of research that backs us up. We know that people, if they have the ability to have a work permit, not only they can find a job, they can find probably a better job. And besides a better job, they can also have access to benefits. They have access to also health insurance and all sorts of things that come around having legal status and being able to integrate better into the community. And then if you pair that with education, for example, being able to acquire ESL skills to be able to speak English, and then later on to finish, high school for those people that are not being, coming to the country without a high school degree. And later on, of course, if you compare it with college access and support, then obviously that is what we believe is the best formula for people to escape poverty. And that's not just necessarily the immigrant community, right? That's across the board. But in our case, because of the impact of immigration, we do see a lot of folks that unfortunately do not have legal status. Does that mean we only help people that can obtain legal status? Absolutely not. We absolutely not. But what that means is that we are constantly advocating our community to have pathways to gain legal status, because we believe that not only is it a moral and ethical thing to do, but it also has an economic implication that would benefit the community and the country as a whole. And so that formula is there, but that formula doesn't happen magically, right? Individuals, as I mentioned before, they come to us with different needs, and we have to meet them where they're at. So we have designed a lot of services around our community that are constantly shifting and adapting depending on what are the needs. And of course, we do provide immigration legal services. That's something that is a core of our services and the things that we offer to our community. We also have social services, and that includes case managers, intake specialists, people at the front lines providing information, referrals. Also, we have behavioral health within social services, and we also offer food and nutrition support. We also added financial assistance. We have always provided financial assistance and homelessness prevention, but in a way this year, obviously with COVID, that has been, now it has become even more prevalent and more important. And then in education, we have an ESL program, we have an after school and college access. Workforce development, we just added this about 2.5 years ago because we realized that there's a lot of workforce development needed in our community that is really hard to access, either because it's in College of Marin, which is really far from the canal, there's no transportation, things are not offering in a culturally competent way. There's all these barriers that, believe it or not, we need to really, exactly what our mission is about, we really need to lift those barriers, because that ability to get and achieve success sometimes is just about removing things like transportation. And that's kind of why we decided to offer this program, because we thought that by bringing it to the community, we actually going to be able to help more folks escape poverty. And we're now launching, we actually have been doing some advocacy and policy forever, right? But now we actually do have a team that is dedicated to doing advocacy and policy, mostly around census, civic engagement, and me and my CEO, Omar Carrera, we are always doing tons of advocacy around issues that affect the immigrant community. And believe it or not, something that people don't know is that we actually own housing in the canal. And we actually own about 12 units. We have 3 buildings, and we own 12 units, and we rent those units very low price. It's for it's not affordable. It's affordable housing, but it's not subsidized houses. So we do not. We own the property. We do accept the vouchers, but also we know that some folks that don't qualify for vouchers, we provide also below cost of the market rent to people who are low income and potentially do not qualify for vouchers. So we are trying to figure out right now what our next role is going to be in housing, but that is something that is absolutely within, our realm of services, or at least advocacy platform, if we really are going to get serious around alleviating poverty. And then real quick, I wanted to show you what our impact is. I have added the impact around COVID-19 because I think it's very important that you see the things that we have accomplished in the past, not only fiscal year, but in the past 6 months, which has been absolutely incredibly challenging. But every year we help, represent people with immigration and immigration court. We currently have about, we have hundreds of current cases because everything now in immigration can take forever. I mean, a Daca case will be quick, but an adjustment into a status can take up to 2 years. Naturalization, we have cases that are taking 1.5 years. So one of the big challenges around immigration is that we have all sorts of new cases, right? We file, let's say, 400 new applications, but what ends up happening is that we also get stuck with a lot of cases for years. In the case of U visas, for example, right now the wait is 10 years to get a work permit for cases that you filed today. And we are right now getting work permits for cases that we filed in 2015. So that really tells you like all the broad, challenges that you have around immigration and how complicated it is to have an immigration practice. And then we, in the social services side of things, we have helped people with unemployment applications. We've always done that, but obviously with the pandemic, this has been it's been a big challenge, and we are helping folks do that. And we have done about 250 unemployment applications since the pandemic started, and that means that we are bringing we support bringing to the community over $500,000 a month, just because we are helping people actually access unemployment applications. And then we continue to do our food pantry, and we are offering this to we will do about 200 people a week with our food pantry. Now we do about 500 people a week. Again, financial assistance has been a huge part of the work that we have done in the past few months. We have offered over $2 million in cash assistance to about 2,000 families in Marin County, in all Marin County, mostly the Canal, but definitely we have helped people in Novato as well, and other places in Marin. Other things that we have done around COVID-19, I still don't know how my CEO sleeps because we have done so much, like providing mobile testing. We actually accommodated our parking lot so that we will have mobile testing with the county. We partnered with the county to do that. We have offered tons of education and prevention. We have some promotores, which basically is advocates within the community giving education around COVID. We hired contact tracers about 2 weeks ago to help the county that cannot find people who provide culturally appropriate contact tracing or investigation. And we have done tons on advocacy with Legal Aid of Marin and Community Action Marin, putting pressure on the elected officials so they actually come with a comprehensive plan to stop the canal outbreak. And on top of that, the Canal Alliance has been working for about 15 years trying to get Wi-Fi in the canal. Just more than ever, our children require the ability to not only have a hardware. I'm so glad the schools are giving Chromebooks away, but the problem that they have is that no internet connection. It's absolutely horrifying. We've been working on this issue for so long, and if there's any silver lining about this pandemic, is that finally county and the city and MCF finally were able to get together and make a substantial investment so that we can provide Wi-Fi to residents in the canal. And on top of that, we continue to have our after-school program. You can imagine what it's like to have an after-school program when you are working, remotely. So that's a big challenge. And of course, our advocacy that has been we have not stopped advocating on issues that are absolutely affecting our community, and not only on immigration, but census, which is key. We actually, we are the lead organization for census in all Marin County, and I'm happy to report that I think overall we are ahead of the response rate that we have in 2010. So I'm very, very proud to report that. And we are also working on our own countywide agenda for housing. So we understand that housing, as I mentioned before, is key to alleviate poverty. So right now we're trying to figure out what kind of role Canal Alliance is going to play on housing. So talking about but I was going to say, because we're a small team, I think the comment box, I lost it, but Chris, if you would like a lawyer or somebody that, that if you look at the chat and you would like to, share some of the questions, or just interrupt me, like I don't mind answering questions as we go. I will be more than happy to make that as interactive as possible for you all. Why is it going? Okay, so some data. I'm not going to spend tons of time here, but I do want to share some of this information with you. I don't know how much time you have spent looking at this, but it's important that we understand that 16% of the total population in Marin, and that includes U.S. born. So we have to understand that all Latinos are actually immigrants, right? Some people were born here. I'm naturalized citizen, so I'm an immigrant, but we work with tons of students, for example, who are all U.S. citizens. And not all of them, but in our after school program, I would say 90% of the children that we work with are actually U.S. citizens that were born here. They were born in Marin. They have lived in the canal their entire lives, and so they're not immigrants. They live with immigrant parents, oftentimes undocumented, but they're U.S. born children. But so that includes the 16% of the population, and about 18%, almost 20% of the total population of Marin, it's foreign born, meaning they're immigrants. They were born abroad, like myself, and almost, half of them comes from countries in Latin America. Mostly are from Mexico, Guatemala. We have had a huge influx of people from Guatemala. So it's mostly people from Mexico and Central America. And then it's unclear how many indigenous, but I have seen that in the past few years, those folks that have been seeking asylum do have more of an indigenous background connection with rural villages in Guatemala. And I can tell you the statistics that we have in Canal Alliance is about 9% of the Canal Alliance's clients either speak indigenous language or I absolutely identify themselves as indigenous. And then the population by city. You probably, it's very obvious to you that San Rafael is the one city that has the majority of, the largest percentage of Latino in the whole county. But you probably will be surprised to know the Marin City, right? 30% of the population in Marin City is actually Latino Hispanic. And what's interesting is that we are actually a larger percentage of Latino live in Marin County than African Americans. So it is quite something that people get surprised, but this is something that I feel like it's important to highlight. So one of the problems that we had, and we have talked about this before, is the fact that unfortunately more than half of the families live in the canal earn less than $35,000 a year. As you can imagine, this is not poverty. We're talking about extreme poverty. So, and that obviously leads to rental conditions and housing conditions that are obviously deplorable. There's tons of overcrowding in the canal area, and that is obviously because of the housing crisis. And something that I wanted to highlight that you may not know either, but there is a lot of newcomers coming to the schools, both San Rafael and Novato. And just in San Rafael and Novato districts, the amount of folks that identified as newcomers came from 646 in 2007 to 793 in 2018, which is an increase of 23%, right? So, and the majority of them again are from Guatemala. And a large population of the children that are having a school lunch are subsidized are children in San Rafael Elementary School that are Latino, so the mostly Latino. And the digital divide, I already talked to you a little bit about that, is absolutely one of the most devastating things between the Latino and white population. There is a study, I did not link it in this presentation, but San Rafael, the city of San Rafael just put out an excellent report about the combination of people in San Rafael that actually the people in the canal that have access to Wi-Fi or hardware and the ability to connect and the rest of San Rafael is absolutely shocking. Well, it's just shocking to see in the report. We know that, but just to see it, it just reminds you of the inequities and how big they are. And then one of the things that I also want to highlight, since we are in the law library and we can talk about the criminal justice system, there absolutely Latinos are overrepresented in the juvenile justice system. In fact, I just heard that, sometimes in the juvenile hall, there's only 4 kids at a time. And in of those kids that are in juvenile hall, like 90% of them are Latino. So that tells you something about what's happening in terms of the criminal justice system and how that's affecting our population and our youth. All right, so any questions about the data, any questions about the population that we serve, and then what the state of Latinos is in Marin County? All right, so what's the COVID-19 impact? Again, this is probably not new data for you. You probably have seen that a million times on the website about COVID. And that's a majority disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. 75% of the cases are Latino Hispanic, and we know that half the cases are happening in the canal. The housing conditions that we have obviously are something that it's preventing us oftentimes to be effective around prevention and around stopping the transmission. There are other issues that are absolutely structural besides housing, but definitely that's the number one. And one of the things that we believe is going to probably end up happening is that if we don't have strong evictions in place, which I'm glad people are advocating for that, it seems like we are moving in the right direction, we would probably see potential mass evictions in that specific area. As many of you know, one of the structural issues have to do with economic justice and the fact that the essential workers that are working in our community are coming from the canal and are Latinos and low income. And it's very hard to know right now how much enforcement there is around providing protective gear to employees, for example. This is I have seen things that are and heard things from clients that it's pretty terrifying. Anyway, so this is anonymous data. This site has tons of information, but it's a way for me to throw everything out there at you. And the reason why I do that is because when we talk about being poor in Marin County, when we talk about being poor, and on top of that, not knowing the language, very very low trust in the government. And on top of that, you have to know the fact that you have trauma, that you don't have transportation, that there's very little, neighborhood conditions that allow you to even move from one neighborhood to another within Marin County. It's really a way to illustrate the amount of socioeconomic inequity that we have. So for you and me, going, for example, to ask for a service because I speak English, I can very easily probably navigate opening an account. I have an ID. I can do things like go to an office in the government and understand a form that is handed out to me. That have all these big words that otherwise I would have no idea what they are. I'm a lawyer. Imagine I am in the absolute top of the ability to understand some of the services. And that requires a level of understanding to navigate that it's really difficult to get. So imagine when you're traumatized already by your immigration journey, you do not have, a government that you trust because of your own immigration experience. And also the government has so many structural problems and sometimes is not able to meet you halfway. We have no political representation or very little political representation. That may change this year, hopefully. But so we are definitely looking at a cycle of inequity that is very difficult to break. And that is exactly why we do have this COVID-19 impact that is disproportionate to our limitation. And that is something that I just wanted to highlight because this is just a list of all the challenges that people experience. I should definitely add there, I have it later, but one of the things that we need to talk about is the lack of access to legal services. And this is something that, of course, is nothing unique to the canal. This is a county, this is a statewide, and I was a nationwide problem, but does add to that inequity for sure. So one of the things, again, connected to the immigration policies and specific to the program that I oversee, which is immigration, we have done tons of advocacy around public charge, especially with COVID-19, is because there's benefits that people may have access to that they are worried because they are fearful that public charge is something that may affect the case. So for those of you who are not familiar with the concept of public charge, it just basically says, if you want to come to the United States, the government tells you, you cannot become dependent on public benefits, because if you do become dependent on public benefits, or potentially looks to me that you're going to become dependent on public benefits, I'm not going to let you enter into the United States. And when I say the word enter in immigration law, that means that I'm going to let you get a green card or get your residence. That's what really means enter when we talk about immigration. And that's a complicated area of the law. And one of the things that the government has done is completely change the concept around a public charge to make it incredibly draconian. And I'm going to spare you the details, but I'm going to tell you this. The public charge is a lot of smoke and mirrors for people that are undocumented living in the United States, because a lot of that doesn't even apply to them. But what it has done, is absolutely gutting the family-based immigration system. It is the amount of people, the decrease in the amount of people applying to come to the United States based on family-based immigration has decreased so dramatically that we are talking an overhaul of the system that we have never seen before. So when we talk about the wall, this is really the wall. Of course, we absolutely can talk about the asylum and what's happening at the border, but it's definitely the real wall is what's happening around public charge, because a lot of people cannot be able to reunite with family members, which is the number one way people come to the United States. Okay, so do you have any questions? Let me open this up so I can see you, because otherwise I can't. You're good? Great. Okay, so what are other immigration updates that we have seen in general that are impacting our community? So one of the things that we know is that the government, the attack to immigrants since day one of the Trump administration has been relentless. And we're talking about over 400 changes in policy. So I don't know, you guys are in the law library. You may know better, like how often the law changes, right? Men, or women, I think all here are women. Have you heard of any area of the law that has seen 400 changes in 4 years, it's maddening. And beyond that, the regulations, things that they have changed on forms, it's just unprecedented. I have never seen anything like this. And I don't practice any other law. I only practice immigration law, right? But I just don't see it. And Chris, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but that I just don't. It's imaginable that the amount of changes that we have to go through. So one of the things that we have done recently, I'm just going to focus on the recent stuff, right? One of the things that the government did is that they said, well, you know what? All these immigrants are bringing all this COVID. So I'm just going to suspend, not only I do public charge, but on top of that, I'm going to ban people from actually being able to come to the United States with a green card. So for example, I petitioned my mom, and if her application becomes current right now and actually they approve it, I cannot even petition, my mom cannot even come to the United States because there's a ban on any green card approved. So that just goes to show you the amount of limitations that we have right now. I think I'm not sure they actually, it expired recently and they were going to renew it, or they just let it expire. I'm actually not sure, but I know that it was for about 60 days. I think they reassume it. Then, because of the pandemic, of course, naturalization is one of the things that you have to do in person. You have to go take an exam. You have to get sworn in. Well, bye-bye. No in-person services. And what that meant is that a lot of people didn't get naturalized. And what happens if you don't get naturalized? You cannot vote. So there is a backlog, and I have the information here of about 700 people that they're waiting for their naturalization. And you know for how much we lost the election, right? So they were talking about almost 1 million people that could potentially be voting, and they can't because they are waiting to be naturalized. And then, of course, there's also some chaos, confusion in immigration courts. The immigration court in San Francisco is not going to open until September 24th or something like that. And then on top of all of that, we were all waiting for the Supreme Court to issue the decision on Daca. Like, what was going to happen to this program? Well, what ended up happening with Daca is that the government, the Supreme Court, yes, they said, you know, the government violated the law when the procedural administrative act or something like that. I cannot remember the name of the law exactly, but they violated a specific provisions, the way that they eliminated the program, violated due process, procedural due process, and therefore the administration has to do all these things so that they can end the program. So what did the government do? They actually did what the Supreme Court said that they should do, and they issue a different memo in which they basically ended the program again, and now they're only allowed renewals for every year instead of every 2 years, and there's no initial DACAs. The government is not issuing new DACAs at this time. So, real quick, other overview of policies, if this wasn't enough, all the things I just told you, the things that you should know, that obviously the government is, the border is for all purposes shut down. Not only they suspended entry because of COVID-19, but the asylum restrictions and the agreements that they have with other countries to actually deport people back has made it basically impossible for people to get into the country and seek asylum. Although there is fewer people being detained and sent to ICE detention during the pandemic, we continue to see enforcement around the country. And unfortunately, of course, like any prison or detention around the country, this has become hotspots for COVID-19. People have, of course, inadequate care, and instead of ICE releasing people, they actually failed to release people from detention, just like it happened in California, in our own jails. All right, so let's get to the meat here, because this is a question I get asked a lot. So, well, what can I help? Well, you can always donate money to us, right? That would be great. But besides doing that, I think if you want to become an ally or accomplice, I mean, there's many ways that we can talk about what your role is going to be. But if there's really a platform that, or a way to help us, and help not only Canal Alliance, but immigrants at large in Marin County. The first thing I think that we have to do is become knowledgeable, right? One of the first, I couldn't do my job, and if I didn't know what kind of community we serve. It's the same thing with advocating, right? Get familiar with the community, get to know how many immigrants live in Marin County. How do they look like? What is the demographic? What are the issues that are really affecting them? Don't make assumptions. Ask, become informed, right? And I have to tell you, myself, I have to challenge my biases often. I have to also challenge my own privilege oftentimes and see if the lens I'm seeing the problem through is my own lens, is the lens of the client, is the lens of the agency. And this is really important work that we have to do. So I encourage you really to do the same. I know it's difficult, but it's definitely the best way to show support to people of color, Black and people of color. And by the way, there's also Black people within the immigrant community. So when we say brown, yes, we're brown, but there's also Black people in the immigrant community as well. So issues that affect people within the Black Lives Matter movement also affect Latinos as well. Don't ask us for more data or another focus group. So as a nonprofit, it's one of the things that is super frustrating sometimes, is that I would like to see, sometimes I hear funders, I hear people, I hear politicians oftentimes saying, we need another study to understand blah. I mean, it's like, no, there's tons of data. I have already given you a lot of data to work with just in one slide. There's a lot of research, and I link it at the end of my presentation, that would allow you to implement policies that are really already could be really impactful. You don't need another focus group. You don't need to tell my community to again show up and fill out another survey. I mean, it's just not. I'm going to put a stop to any kind of stuff like that, just like my community doesn't need another flyer. That's not what we need. Support census outreach. I know we also have like only 3 weeks to go with the census. This is so important, but I know that we are kind of like almost there, but it is probably one of the main things we can focus around advocacy. That's why we were playing such a big role, because it's the only way we're going to be able to get more resources. And then if you are a service provider, if you're a nonprofit, are you providing, culturally appropriate services, right? So ask yourself, this may not be appropriate to all of you, and maybe you have a private practice, and maybe that's not the clientele you want to help with, right? So this is not something that you have to do every day. This message is more for people that are receiving funding, that are there to give services to low-income communities. And I want to see people that when they're walking to their door, that they're actually getting treated with dignity. So this is what it's about. Am I creating additional barriers, right? Because sometimes what happens is like, oh yeah, you can access the service, but it turns out that that county office is located in a place where local transportation is almost impossible, right? So really, are you providing the right access to the people that you're trying to serve? Are we over-policing? Are we over-policing in areas in the canal? Well, sometimes we are and sometimes we aren't. So sometimes we think that sometimes people do complain that police officers actually do not take some of the reports seriously. So sometimes that could be a double-edged sword, right? So this could be a whole other conversation just on policing, and I don't want to distract you, but this is something that is a question that sometimes we really have to ask ourselves. I know that in terms of DUIs, for example, I am very confident in saying that I do believe that there is a disproportionate impact in policing in our in the Canal area and in San Rafael specifically that affects the immigrant community. And prioritize housing. I mean, I cannot tell you, you can talk to me about all sorts of issues in Marin County and how you want to show up in our Board of Supervisors meeting. I think that's great that you want to advocate for better immigration policies federally, but really in Marin County, what people need is housing, and in California. So I think that it's hard to agree on all issues, but if there's one will really have the most impact on poverty, probably one of them will be housing. And just another thing that I want to throw at you, some of the things that we are trying to do is that we submitted a letter, we call it with Community Action Marin and with Legal Aid of Marin, and we actually have all people, signing to that letter. It's like making our elected officials take a bold stand and come up with that plan. And I'm not talking about this equity plan that the county has. I want to see specific strategies lined out of where we're going to be doing investment. A lot around housing, but the investment on how we're going to get out of this absolute economic catastrophe that it's affecting our community in Marin County. The economic catastrophe goes, of course, individuals, but it goes to small businesses that employs the people that we have, the small businesses that our community owns. So we really do need a socioeconomic plan that will really bring our community not only in a better place, but also addressing the structural problems that were already there when before the pandemic started. And of course, spread the word about testing. If people are not sure about testing, let them know that that's the best thing they can do. There's tons of education and outreach that materials that we have that you can use. I know that most of you have shown us support for housing protections around evictions, so thank you for all of that. And absolutely prioritize legal services. One of the platforms that Canal Alliance is trying to really advocate is increased funding for legal aid of Marin. Maybe we can throw the law library in there, right? But one of the things that we need to do, and it makes me think that we need to broaden that. I mean, I'm glad I'm here because this is something we can talk about. But it is absolutely vital, particularly when we're going to probably face mass evictions, is that people need to have access to legal services. I cannot tell you the amount of phone calls that we get because people are afraid that they're going to be evicted. But when you ask them if they actually, let's say, notified the landlord, they haven't done it. And one of the problems about the way they write laws is that we include all these little details, right? The devil is in the details. And as we lawyers know. And the only way is that according to the eviction protections that in Marin County issued is that you have had to inform your employer within 7 days that you could not pay the rent when the rent is due. So what it might happen is we're going to end up in litigation because I can assure that the majority of people did not pay rent and did not tell the landlord. We did our best, and Legal Aid of Marin did their best to do outreach around this, but we're talking about thousands of people here. And maybe they informed the first month, but I'm not sure if for the second month they have to do the exact same thing. So they thought probably by doing the first month, the second one was covered. So believe me, this is going to be so complicated. Or what is going to happen to, which we are starting to see, is people are moving out of the canal. So right now in immigration legal services, we have had quite a bit of calls trying to change addresses with immigration court and with USCIS because they're moving out of this area. So that is also going to have a huge impact on our economic recovery. So if we don't have access to somebody who actually be able to provide legal advice and help them fill out, write a letter, because it's not only providing the service over the phone. You have to help that person write that letter because they're not going to be able to do it on their own or write that text. It is a process that does require to be culturally appropriate, and that is so important when we talk about legal services in the nonprofit world. And for low-income people in general. So I think that this is something that in our strategy, we absolutely understand that legal services need to be there. So it is immigration services for sure, but also other areas. Employment is another huge one. It's our employers providing protective gear, our employers providing, around education with COVID-19, our employers forcing people to come to work even though they test positive. We know that that's happening. So believe me, there's so many complexity around these issues that if we don't tackle it from the legal perspective, it's going to be very difficult to actually help people get over this crisis. So I've been advocating for that, not only as a person seeing people every day struggling, but also as someone who fears that our profession is going through a crisis right now if we don't really understand how to better and modernize ourselves and provide services in a much more innovative way. And in fact, you will see probably in the next year, there's going to be non-lawyers providing legal services very soon because of the crisis of what's happening. And as you probably know, those are some of the rules that are actually being discussed from the professional responsibility perspective. So that's going to be probably what's going to happen. I'm not sure. I'm being recorded and maybe that doesn't happen, but I think that with the crisis that we have in front of us, it would not surprise me that we will see a diversification in the legal profession that would include all the actors that are not people with law degrees providing basic services that all the times were exclusively performed by lawyers. All right, so enough of me. Yes, go ahead.
May I make a reference? You were very timely about this because you're probably aware of the decision that just happened in the Arizona courts, and they are actually opening up a variety of it's not exactly modeled on what was the Washington program, which was the triple LT. But basically it is a scenario where you have a paralegal who probably goes back for an additional year or two of training, and one of the first things that they'll be able to do in Arizona will be tenant and family law. So what you're describing, that and the navigator system, which is utilized in New York courts, the housing courts, to help people literally navigate through the court system, I think you will see a lot of this.
I love your comment. I think this is such a learning opportunity for all of us on how we can really help the community, because there's not enough resources out there. And also, even for the law library and other organizations, reevaluate what kind of ideas we can throw out there, right? So we have the health center and the court, but we know the health center has absolutely limitations around what they can do, right? This is a great service, but is it sufficient? I mean, and that is obviously something that I don't have to do, that you know much better than I do, because you're working with people around things that are not from the immigration perspective. So I really appreciate your comment. I do. And happy to brainstorm with you about that based on the need that we see. These are tons of resources that we have here. Again, for those people that want to have access to this information, here it is. It does tell you the type of cash assistance and the type of programs that are available. You will be surprised, for example, the amount of people that still are afraid of, for example, getting tested, because they think that's going to affect even their immigration case, right? So not only it's not a public charge issue, it's a public health issue, obviously. So that is something that I put out the link saying, don't worry, you can get tested, you can get treatment, and it's going to be okay. You can get the vaccine later. That apparently we're going to have it very quickly, and it's going to be great. And so you can get the vaccine. It's fine. All the services that are available to people, right? That for pregnant women, one of the things that we have seen, unfortunately, is that a lot of Latino pregnant women have been really mistreated by the medical system during COVID-19. It's actually the disparities, not only for Black mothers, but also for Latino mothers, have been quite dramatic. The things around cash assistance, right? That actually kind of went away, but that was something that did happen, and we could see another round of that potentially. And also remember SNAP, which is food stamps, right? That's something that is available. And again, you have no idea how many families I see in my day-to-day work where the parents are undocumented and they think that because the children don't qualify for food stamps. That's actually not right. So please, 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 if you see families like that, tell them that if their children are U.S. citizen, that they can absolutely qualify for SNAP. There was a pandemic EBT that is actually not happening anymore, but you should know that it's possible that they, because now they're going to have the lunch program again, I think, in the schools. I'm not clear on that. I should do some research, but I think the schools are a great place for obviously folks to get nutrition. And please know that also unemployment still out there. We have, again, submitted tons of unemployment and applications, disability insurance, that as you probably know, but that actually applies for undocumented folks too. So that is something that people don't know, and usually don't know that they can actually apply to. And paid family leave. We have this great family leave that actually my agency, I'm taking advantage of some of that, right? That actually does apply for a lot of immigrants, because if you do have a work permit, you can ask your employer that you need to take care of your child. And a lot of people in the schools, a lot of families don't know that. They can, if you have an employer for less than 500 employees, I think that you probably do qualify for family leave. That is actually quite generous. It's about 2/3 of your salary, and that could be something that people can start using. So keep that out there as a good resource and information for folks that come your way. Tons of information about food pantries here. You can go to the food pantry, SF Moraine Food Pantry, to find places that have distribution of food. They have done a great job. I have pop-up pantries and include meals in Moraine County. Please know that there's also care and shelter within the county that does provide hotel for people to isolate. And I can talk also about care and shelter if you have any curiosity about how this program works. We do have an emergency fund that continues to accept applications, but I can tell you right now that there is about 1,500 people waiting for financial assistance. And as I mentioned before, we have already helped about 2,000 people with over $2 million. And I'm not sure we can do $2 million again. So we do not have $2 million in our fund still. We have about $600,000. So, and we already have quite a bit of a long wait list. So, but people can apply online in that link that it's there. As you know, rental assistance have come from Marine Community Foundation. I think they're still going through the wait list of thousands of people. And there was some disaster relief only for 30,000 individuals, I think, all Bay Area. It was quite shocking. The governor made this big announcement about disaster relief for undocumented, and only 30,000 people were able to benefit in all the Bay Area, the entire Bay Area. So, and that's gone very quickly. So again, these are a list of resources from protecting immigrant families, water eligibility for different public benefits that people should know about, public charge screening tools that people can use. You don't need to see a lawyer. You can do it online through texting or through a great platform called Keep Your Benefits, and it's actually pretty cool. You can open it. I'm going to open it. Let me see if I manage to get it and show it to you. So you can choose the language, all right, and then you go in and then you can then let me see. You go.
Lucia, we're still seeing your PowerPoint, not your screen.
Sorry. Okay, I don't know what's going on. Okay, I'm sorry about that. So, but I'll send you. I'll make sure I send you the link so you have it. And that's it. It's 7 minutes to 7. And I want to make sure that if you have any questions, we'll make time for that. I'm sure I shower you with tons of information, but I'll be happy to, share more resources. You can have the slide. I will send it to you all, so you can have a list of resources. Any questions for me?
No, Laura did have a comment on chat. She just reaffirmed what you were saying, that people are afraid to apply for EDD for fear that it counts as public charge.
No.
And how that's gross misinformation.
Oh, yeah, that's correct. Mm-hmm. So. Yes, I'm so sorry. It happens a lot. It happens to us all the time. It's so sad. So sad. But we can have a consultation. The one thing we have capacity for is consultations on public charge. So, Lori, I'm gonna connect with you if you want to give you. You can even do it. Schedule the appointment yourself if you want to for a client.
Oh wow.
So we have a system in which you put the appointment in my attorney's calendar. So I will send you guys that link. I'd be happy to share that. Or you can just tell the person to call my department and we will schedule them.
That would be great. I have started to get, the calls that I've been getting. I get a significant number of calls from people that need someone that speaks Spanish, which isn't me. I mean, I do my best. I have my cheat sheet for lawyers in the library, which isn't going right now. And the Google Translate is helpful.
Yeah.
But I would have to say that probably a higher percentage of the calls that I get are from people that want someone who speaks Spanish. And it's, landlord, tenant, that type of thing. So we are hoping to get the lawyers in the library program back up on a virtual platform as soon as we expand our bandwidth.
Yeah.
And there is an attorney who speaks Spanish who has expressed interest already in participating. But I like your suggestion. I mean, I like the idea of maybe looking into paralegals or somebody, seeing if we can somehow expand who's available at these lawyers in the library, because maybe the paralegals could assist with like forms or, the letter writing, or, they can't give legal advice, obviously, but for stuff like that.
Yeah. And this is part of the issues that we do some of that, but that's the thing that it's a service that is so needed. And so my social services team, we are not lawyers. And sometimes we get in trouble because, for example, we were told by Legal Aid of Moraine yesterday, a case manager of mine got in trouble because she did a labor commission claim.
Oh.
And yes, so, and then, Bob, eager beaver, you know how it is. But then, those things are risky, but if we keep it absolutely very limited, and these are things that happen sometimes, but it's rare. But if you have very limited, scope of what they can do, writing a letter, for example, to a landlord doesn't require a lawyer. It just requires somebody sitting in Spanish and writing that letter to a landlord, and that is so valuable, so valuable.
Yeah.
That is something we could actually assist on, and there is a large paralegal community here in the Greater Bay Area. There's fully 8 paralegal programs throughout the Greater Bay Area, and it is possible to do outreach and ask for bilingual paralegals to volunteer.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I also have, I think it was Sacramento, there's a couple, they have a list of resources in Spanish And so I do try to give that out to people. Resources that people can access online to help inform themselves. But I know people usually need some sort of guidance.
Absolutely. And send them our way. I will absolutely share the resources with you because it is so easy to schedule an appointment and it's so easy for them to call us. That is the one thing we do. We are so over capacity in so many ways, and that's something I wanted to tell you, that a lot of folks get referred our way, right? So they call social services, and sometimes it takes a little bit for us to return the call. Sometimes we say no because we don't have the resources to help that person with rental assistance, right? Which is the number one reason why people call us. Yeah. But with an immigration, we're really limited on the amount of cases that we can take. But the one thing we're really prioritizing right now is public charge, because we know that if people don't take public benefits right now, the crisis is going to become even more unsustainable. So we have absolutely have prioritized those services. So please send them our way, please.
Okay.
Yeah, and Lucia, if you get us that PowerPoint, we can put a lot of those resources up on our website.
I would love that. Yeah, for sure.
Would it be possible in the future to maybe consider some collaborative efforts for outreach, bilingual outreach? If we are filming this tonight and recording it, who's to say that we could not do some of these issues in this kind of presentation and make them available online?
Yeah, and we're also going to have a Facebook Live on tenant rights on Wednesday. So it's going to be with Legal Letter Moran. It's going to be in Spanish though, but it's going to be in live, and people can ask questions, and it's going to be recorded too. So we can do one in English too, for example, and you can post both. I mean, you can do the one in Spanish and also the one in English, but we are absolutely doing that type of events too because they're needed. So those are great ideas.
You're doing that next week?
Yes, I will send you the flyer. I will just finish the flyer so that we can actually promote it.
So is it about AB 3088, the bill that just passed?
It's about, yes, in general, about tenant rights in general. So it's going to be about that bill. We're going to cover that, and we're going to cover the ordinance locally, what Marin County has done, and also what the governor has done, plus the CDC make an announcement. Does that have any strength? Like all those things we're going to be covering next week.
So are they going to put that up on their website then? Because yes. I would. So that I can refer people to that then.
Yes, absolutely. Facebook Live, they're gonna do it live, and they can also always access it after it happened, even if it's not live. People have access to it.
Okay, good to know.
If this is on Facebook and Instagram, one could be sharing these links, and I think this is an opportune time for us to be doing that. As we learn about resources that are coming up, we can offer ourselves, on our website as a conduit also.
Right.
And also you can do more advocacy too, asking for more resources, talking to the folks, expanding legal services, and also for you. I mean, honestly, I think this is something that we could absolutely think about, right? What kind of resources you can bring in a cost-effective way for people to navigate such complex legal problems. And I think thinking outside the box, I am totally on board to brainstorm with you about that, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions for Lucia?
Oh, if we have time for one more.
Sure.
Yeah. Hi, Lucia. My name's Emily Smith. I'm a longtime resident of San Rafael. For you sharing all this information, this has been so educational. And thank you for doing that. I wanted to follow up on one of the challenges you mentioned because it seems so crucial to education, and that's the lack of Wi-Fi availability in the canal. Could you expand a little on what's been done to address this and what else remains to be done?
Yes, so they just installed something called Mesh Network. I mean, somebody has to pronounce Mesh Network. I'm so sorry, I might be mispronounced it, but the technology, which is the cables, or the problem with the canal in the area, there was never the wiring or the cables needed to actually be able to provide bandwidth, the bandwidth that you need for internet. So what they needed to do, they needed to install all this different network mesh things to actually, I'm so sorry that I'm not technical about this at all. As you can tell, that's not my background, to actually be able to provide Wi-Fi for free. So it is not only the residents, but there's like 3 or 4 streets within the canal some of the most with the most density that actually have free Wi-Fi, and you can go into the canal now, and your phone can pick up the Wi-Fi as well. So it is free not only for residents but for everyone. So instead of waiting for companies or for Comcast to open the holes in the street and try to bring bandwidth, broader bandwidth, then they decided to do the Wi-Fi for about 3 or 4 streets in the canal area. So that is what really has been, really life-changing for students, because before, when the pandemic hit and the classes were, so there was no more in-person education, then they were all using the smartphones and they could not load a video. Like videos were like, when you were trying to watch a show on Netflix and it's like 0, 5%, 10%.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what was happening with the Zooms. It was impossible for them. And all the videos that they needed to watch, it was constantly like this. So they were not able to even be present in the schools because the internet that they had was just terrible. So, and because they had to rely on whatever smartphone technology they have. So now with the Chromebooks plus the Wi-Fi, we have actually been able to provide, connectivity to most of the students in the canal, not all of them, but most of them for sure. So it is absolute a mesh. Thank you, my colleague Laura. Was amazing. Thank you for being here, Laura, which is one of my amazing case managers helping with all this stuff that I'm talking about that lawyers don't do, but that we could be doing. So Laura, yes, it's mesh. So that's what it is, and I think that's actually been very helpful. But I can do, Emily is linked to you the San Rafael report that is much more articulate than what I am saying right now, and explains it very well. And there's also a fund for that. So if you go to canalalliance.org, you can absolutely contribute to the digital divide. And I think our development team also put a communication together that is a lot better explaining what we have done.
Oh, is that on your website?
Yes, canalalliance.org. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I will go take a look. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Okay. Denise, did you want to close out?
I'm so glad you joined us tonight. I just sent you a link to something, and if you have a chance to take a look at it, let me know if you'd like to discuss it. It's the Navigator program, and it might be something you find intriguing. We would very, very much appreciate any opportunity for further collaboration. I suspect we can learn a lot from the efforts and the ground that you are already covering, and perhaps come up with some new and good ideas for us to be sharing information to a broader community. I am very grateful you joined us today.
Of course, absolutely. My pleasure. And thank you for all your services you have done with lawyers at the library. I'm very grateful that we have that. It's so needed. Hopefully we can expand it one day.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Have a nice evening, and thank all of you for coming. We hope to see you again next month.
Thank you.
Take care. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.